Throughout the history of America, free speech was instilled as early as day one, 1716, Independence Day. However, people argue whether free speech is ethical or unethical. A lot of times these days we experience unethical free speech by hate speech or demoting a people group, which is obviously wrong. So throughout American history, freedom of speech has been celebrated as a core value. However, unethical controversies over what should and what shouldn't be allowed, throughout our laws, cultures, and responsibilities kind of limits to what, we can say as an American citizen. So today I'll be talking about how every person in this room, every person here has access to social media, texting, calling, communicating, where freedom of speech really affects what we say. My first point brings me to how I'll talk about how it was used, freedom of speech was used in the Constitution. It's always been there. Freedom of speech has always been there. However, it's not really been practiced or studied. People have just experienced free speech, and there were some conflicts that did affect the boundaries of free speech. And today I'm going to be explaining really how you can ethically have a sense of freedom of speech. So demoting a people group, using derogatory terms or hate speech, those are all wrong, unethical ways. So good ways to use ethical freedom of speech is to use true but kind words without demoting any groups of people or groups in general. And to understand the concept of freedom of speech today, we have to go back in time to when America was new and where we didn't really have much facts and have as much experience for freedom of speech in history. So we're going to go back to 1716. It's always been a staple. Freedom of speech has always been a staple in American history, and it's never been practiced, though. We've never really looked into it. And early American thinkers like Thomas Jefferson thought it was good for citizens to keep democracy. So him and James Madison, they came together and were like, okay, well, to keep democracy, we need to have our citizens agree with us and be able to make decisions for us, not in a overpowering way, but in a way so everyone can be on the same side and be on the same right to speech and on the same pathway to success. And Jefferson talked about this a little bit too. As Americans and as a group, we all have an ethical responsibility to use our freedom of speech wisely. And there are actions we can take to do that. We have seen, where freedom of speech came from and what we can do with it. Now it's time to bring these ideas together. We've seen many examples of freedom of speech being intolerable, and we've seen it where certain people, certain groups are easily violated by it, and then we have seen people where they have said something that has been derogatory or hateful to another group, and it has costed them so much conflict and so much success in the way of losing it. A good example to me is a Florida quarterback who actually was a very highly talented recruit, really good, recruited by Florida, committed to Florida. Everything was going right for the kid. He ended up, unfortunately, on social media, which is what we go back to, social media can be the root of all this. That's why it's hate speech and derogatory speech and freedom of speech is so prompted negatively in today's world because it's so easy to get wrapped up in it with social media. But this guy said a racist term, derogatory term, hateful term on social media. And as it got more likes, views, more interaction, people really started to realize, like, wow, this is wrong. And he ended up getting his offer and scholarship taken away from Florida. He still plays football. He played at a very small junior college school. But things like that, what you say and what you view through your words, can really affect your future and your success. And that's why, as Americans, like I already said, we have a responsibility. Freedom of speech does not mean you can say whatever you want. It does not mean you can throw out derogatory terms and hate speech. It's a gift. It's a privilege from early Americans that were given to us, and we have to take actions in doing it the right way. Freedom of speech has always been a staple of America, and it's been a value since the founding of the country, and it's always debated and sometimes restricted these days, especially because you don't want to say something that offends people or gets you hurt mentally or makes you where your reputation is lowered. Major historical events, another examples of this, and historical events and Supreme Court cases from the Sedition Acts to the Civil Rights protests to a modern social media issue. They have shaped the unethical or ethical boundaries of what we can say. An ethical responsibility to use our free speech in ways that are honest, respectful, and mindful of the impact on others, and that we can really take concrete actions to support responsible free speech expressions. However, that doesn't mean you can obviously go saying whatever. We need to do it in an ethical way, and a lot of people don't really know what ethical means. When I mean ethical, I mean in a smart, blunt but kind way to where you can get your point across factually without getting in the way of certain groups or dehumanizing the situation or people. And like I said earlier, we all have the access to freedom of speech. And access, I mean technology, especially technology. It gives us so many pathways to it. And we just have to be responsible with the way we use it ethically. Thank you for listening. I really hope this gets through to y'all. This is a very big issue, I feel like, whether it's unethical or ethical. Sometimes it's hard to ethically promote freedom of speech, but as you study it and as you read it into this issue, you realize there are ways to be ethical about it. So thank you everyone for listening.